Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack topics that will really give you that crucial perspective you need.
Especially if you're keeping an eye on current events, maybe tracking foundational thinkers.
Exactly. And today we're focusing on someone incredibly significant in Indian history, Jyotiba Phule. His birth anniversary was just on April 11th.
Right, and even Prime Minister Modi paid tribute, which sort of highlights his continued relevance.
Definitely. So our mission for this deep dive is to really explore the work of this trailblazing thinker, educator, social reformer.
And figure out why his 19th century ideas are still so important for understanding India today. Especially for, say, UPSC aspirants connecting history to current social issues.
And we'll be drawing on some of the discussions around his anniversary, the kind you often see in places like the Hindu.
Good plan. It's a vital figure to understand.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. He was born in 1827, and I understand there was a specific, quite personal event early on that really shaped him.
Yes, absolutely. It's often cited as a key moment. In 1848, he went to a Brahmin friend's wedding.
Okay.
And he faced, well, pretty severe humiliation there just because of his caste being publicly excluded like that.
Ah, I see. That must have been deeply impactful.
Profoundly. It apparently ignited this really strong resolve in him to fight social discrimination. It wasn't just personal offense. It became, a catalyst.
Fueled his mission, basically, to build a fairer society.
Precisely. And he didn't just sit on that feeling. He channeled it into action, particularly into education, almost immediately.
Right, the schools, that's one of his most famous contributions, isn't it?
Hugely famous, and rightly so.
Yeah.
In that same year, 1848, he and his wife, Savitribai Phule, who was just as remarkable, started what's considered India's very first school for girls.
The first one, wow, that must have been incredibly radical back then.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the context. Educating girls wasn't just uncommon. It flew in the face of entrenched social norms. He was inspired partly by people like the missionary Cynthia Farrar, but also by rationalist thinkers like Thomas Paine.
So a mix of influences pushing him towards this quite revolutionary act.
Yes, and the place was amazing. By the time he was only 24, they had already established 18 schools for girls, plus several night schools for workers and kids from underprivileged backgrounds.
18 schools by 24. That's incredible dedication. It really shows the scale of the need he saw and his commitment.
It does. And connecting this back, you see, Phule saw education as the lever, the tool for social change.
Empowering people through knowledge.
Exactly. Empowering the marginalized, women, lower castes, giving them the intellectual tools to challenge the oppressive systems. Starting a school for girls wasn't just about reading and writing. It was a direct hit against patriarchy and caste hierarchy.
It laid the groundwork, you could say.
Definitely. Challenging who even had the right to be educated.
And this focus on challenging the system directly, that leads us to the Satyashodhak Samaj, founded in 1873.
Correct. The Society of Truth Seekers. This was a really significant step. It positioned itself quite deliberately as a kind of counterforce.
The counterforce to what, exactly?
To the other reform movements happening at the time, like the Brahmo Samaj or the Arya Samaj. Phule felt those movements, while doing some good work, were largely led by upper caste individuals, and didn't, perhaps, fully grasp or prioritize the deep structural issue of caste discrimination affecting the lower strata. His experience with the schools, seeing the prejudice firsthand.
It showed him education wasn't enough on its own.
I think so.
Yeah.
It showed the need for a dedicated platform to tackle caste head-on. That was the Satyashodhak Samaj.
And his writing played a big role here too, didn't it? I'm thinking of Ghulam Giri.
Oh, absolutely. Ghulam Giri, meaning slavery, is incredibly powerful. He makes this really stark, provocative comparison between the condition of India's lower castes and that of enslaved African Americans in the U.S.
Wow. That's designed to shock people into seeing the reality, isn't it?
Precisely. He directly denounced what he called Brahminical oppression. He didn't see it as just social prejudice, but as a deliberate tool of systemic subjugation.
And by Brahminical oppression, he meant the dominance social, religious, economic used to keep lower castes down.
Yes, exactly. Justified through religious interpretations, restricting access to education, resources, the whole system.
But he wasn't just criticizing. He was also proposing very concrete solutions, especially around education, going beyond just starting schools.
Yes, that's a really important point. He was a fierce advocate for compulsory primary education. For everyone, but with a special focus on the poor.
Compulsory education back then.
Yes. And when he spoke to the Education Commission, he wasn't vague. He suggested specific things like scholarships, incentives, practical measures to make sure kids, especially rural kids who were needed for work, could actually attend school and stay there.
So it wasn't just build a school, but how do we actually get the most vulnerable kids into the school and keep them there, understanding the real-world barrier?
Exactly. He saw that intellectual empowerment through education needed to go hand in hand with economic support to really break down those deep-rooted caste barriers. They were interlinked problems.
That makes sense. Now, alongside all the social action, he also had a distinct spiritual philosophy, didn't he? That sounds like it was quite nuanced.
It really was not a simple rejection of faith. He was very critical of Orthodox Hinduism, particularly how it was used to justify caste.
Okay.
But he apparently had respect for aspects of Christianity and Islam, specifically where they emphasized equality.
Interesting. So looking for the egalitarian strands.
Sort of. But ultimately, he leaned much more towards a rationalist and humanist philosophy.
Yeah.
Reason, human dignity, evidence, over dogma and tradition.
And his final work, Sarvajanik Satyadharma Pustak, reflects this.
Perfectly. It's really his vision for a universal, inclusive spirituality. It rejects caste divisions, complex rituals. A more direct, personal, egalitarian connection with the divine, completely free from caste or creed boundaries.
Fascinating. Moving beyond the social and spiritual, he also had some really practical, almost innovative ideas about agriculture, didn't he?
Yes. His work, Shetkari Anchasud, Farmer's Whip, goes into the problems farmers faced, and his proposed solutions were quite something.
Like what?
Well, he suggested using soldiers in peacetime for civil works, building small dams, bunds, improving irrigation.
Okay, that's clever use of manpower.
Right, and releasing pasture lands controlled by forest departments back to villagers for their livestock.
Makes sense.
And this one was quite forward-thinking, importing cattle specifically for meat, potentially easing pressure on existing farm animals.
These are very grounded, specific ideas, not just broad statements aimed at tackling poverty in the countryside directly.
Totally. It shows the breadth of his thinking. He clearly saw that reforming agriculture was essential for social justice. Breaking that cycle of poverty, especially for lower caste farmers, was key to food security and overall progress.
And we absolutely have to talk about his views on women's rights. It seems his fight against caste inequality was deeply connected to his fight for gender equality.
Inextricably linked. You see it in his support for Pandita Ramabai when she converted to Christianity. That caused a huge uproar, but he defended her.
Right.
And his consistent criticism of polygamy. These were very progressive stances. He didn't see caste oppression and gender oppression as separate issues.
She saw the connection?
Yes. He challenged the double standards in religious texts and patriarchal practices with the same force he used against the caste system.
It's really clear he was attacking inequality on multiple fronts simultaneously.
A holistic approach, really.
So, looking back at this immense body of work and activism, what would you pinpoint as his most significant, lasting legacy?
That's a big question. I think it's multifaceted. It's his courage in questioning oppressive systems when few dared to. It's his pioneering work in education, opening doors for girls and the marginalized. It's his effort to build inclusive institutions.
The inspiration factor, too.
Definitely. His challenging of norms, his vision for a more just society. It continues to inspire activists, thinkers, reformers today. His ideas are still shaping the conversation around caste, education, social justice in India. No doubt about it.
So wrapping up our deep dive for today, we've seen Jyotiba Phule tackling inequality through education, through social reform, through a rationalist worldview, all incredibly relevant still.
Absolutely. And his work offers vital perspectives, especially, as we mentioned, for UPSC aspirants trying to get a handle on the roots of contemporary issues.
Which leads to a thought for our listeners, particularly those preparing for exams. Which of Phule's ideas hits home most strongly for you today?
Yeah, and think about current challenges, poverty, education gaps, discrimination. Where might his approach offer some, useful insights or angles? It's worth considering how his 19th century solutions might inform our 21st century problems.
Definitely. And for UPSC folks, understanding Phule gives you that crucial context for so many syllabus topics: modern history, social justice, governance, policymaking. He's foundational.
Truly. Figures like him help you grasp how Indian society evolved, the debates around equality that are still ongoing.
And you can often find good analysis on figures like Phule and their relevance in places like the Hindu, which is obviously a go-to source for many aspirants.
A very valuable resource. We really hope this discussion has sparked some further interest. What aspects stood out most?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this deep dive on Jyotiba Phule raised questions or gave you new perspectives, please let us know. Like, subscribe to the deep dive for more discussions like this.
And definitely leave a comment. Share your reflections, ask questions. We want to hear from you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this important exploration.